So I watched the new Pixar movie Soul recently, and it got me thinking a lot about personal cosmology and our relationship with this world, this universe, and our place in it. This isn't going to be a review of the movie Soul. I'm not really interested in telling you whether I liked it or not, or what I did and didn't like about it. I'll give you a hint though. I loved it. What I'd rather do is talk about how it made me feel and the ideas that it brought into my head as I was watching it and in the days after. First of all, I want to say how excited I am that Pixar went for it and made this movie. I see the world through a spiritual lens, or I enjoy doing so. I don't know if it's natural or not, or just what I enjoy doing, how I enjoy interacting with the world. And I don't think that's necessarily maybe as common of a worldview and kind of an outlook in our modern age. It's definitely a little bit more of a secular culture that we live in. And even if people do see the world through a spiritual lens naturally, I feel like, again, in this growing secular age, it's not as common to be taught how to do so or to appreciate the way in which you do or whatever. It's not encouraged necessarily. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with a secular culture and the washing away of old religions. I think that we need new, more modern religions that speak to us in fresh ways. I feel like most religions aren't used in the proper way that they, were intended to. A perfect example of this is the Bible. I believe that it's entirely metaphor. There's very little historical occurrence in the Bible. It's metaphor. These are stories of things that go on in our heads, how we kind of interact with our own headspace. Every single story in the Bible, from what I understand and from what I've been told, is a metaphor for the brain and the conscious subconscious. It excites me that people are growing up with these words in their current language. Souls, parallel realities, alternate timelines. These aren't necessarily new ideas, but they're being presented in a way that is accessible and modern to young and current minds. I really like the way that the creators of this movie introduced these ideas without culture. It's just concept. Language can sometimes be a barrier to cohesive understanding. Certain cultural norms or religious ideas might be filled with preconceived notions or misunderstandings. Even the idea of heaven is sort of skirted around. It's referred to as the great beyond and is seen as sort of just a source of light that you go to after your time in the material plane. I should warn you, there will be minor spoilers for this movie. Although me calling them minor doesn't really mean anything. I sort of don't necessarily believe in spoilers or aren't affected by them. I can know a lot about a movie or a story beforehand and still get lost in it. What I'm going to try and do is stick to themes and ideas presented by the movie and not so much actual story beats. So obviously, if this is something that concerns you, get out of here, watch the movie, maybe come back, watch this. You'll enjoy both. So the movie puts forward the idea that a soul moves through the material plane and it has a before and an after. So a pre-life on Earth and a post-life on Earth. After isn't really explored. We kind of see it for a moment, but it's mostly, again, like I said, these stars that sort of bleed into this singular bright light. Kind of a beautiful image, but it's not explored at all, and again, only called the Great Beyond, I believe. As an interesting side note, the main character transitions from the Great Beyond to the Great Before, I believe it's called. And as he's falling through this space, which could be seen as the material plane from a sort of an astral perspective, or it could just be sort of kind of vague divine or spiritual space. But what he falls through is this sort of like warbling noise and these vibrations, which I found to be really cool. Again, I don't know how spiritual or like tuned into magical ideas or these creators were, but a lot of the ideas that they present are really interesting, and the idea of there being sound in this spiritual space, this astral space, was really interesting because of the in the Bible, before there was creation was the Word. God spoke existence into creation. And it's a very magical concept, sort of the idea that words are the source code of this universe, and that words are the way in which we control and kind of move through this universe. Without language, we wouldn't be able to do nearly as much as we are able to do. The idea of being able to speak things into existence, to create, is a very magical idea. Most of our story takes place in the before of a soul's existence, where souls are essentially created and then given a taste of the world. Every soul is paired with a mentor, who is someone who has lived out their life on Earth, but before passing into the great beyond, offers their insight and perspective and stories about their life on Earth to give this soul an idea of what it might be drawn to. The role of the mentor is essentially to share their own life experiences and inspire the new soul before going to Earth, or to show the soul basically all of the things that exist on Earth and to find what they're passionate about, what they're interested in, what they might enjoy. So the mentor walks the soul through this process, gathers, I believe, 6 sort of core kind of interests or passions. Once those are collected, the soul is essentially given a spark that allows it to move into Earth and inhabit a body and live a life. There's so much to be said for the nature of souls as they explore this space. They're presented as genderless, even though 22, the main soul in our story, is voiced by Tina Fey. At one point, she does explain that this is just a projection. This is just your perception, kind of me. I could be anything here. I could be an old man, or I could be, and there's this fluidity, and they sort of just settle on these forms, and they're very vague and sort of ghost-like, which is really cool, especially kind of seen with our modern language of identity and gender, whereas it's more about the soul's essence that it then gets put into a body, so there's variation there. They're obviously presented as ageless. She's been, our main soul has been essentially avoiding life on Earth. She's the 22nd soul out of however many billions they say, I forget. But she is the same. She hasn't necessarily experienced any sort of change here. She's ageless. I also really like the idea of the randomness of souls. They just sort of jump into this hole with the Earth below them and fall towards the Earth. The idea, it gives this, to me, it gave this idea of connectivity. It reminded me that we are all just souls here on the material plane, and the circumstances of our birth are so random. Me being this person, it's only just a matter of, circumstances and coordinates that brought me to life in this moment. Like, the soul could have expressed itself in any way. I think that's a really cool idea and a really binding idea. They also at one point explore the idea of lost souls who sort of wander the astral sea, this sandy expanse where these souls who have become so obsessed and caught up in an individual idea aren't able to experience anything else. They've become so focused in and latched onto what they're obsessed with that is all there is to them. And there are these hulking, kind of sand-covered souls that wander the astral sea. Only one, I think, is shown, how it's living in the material plane, and they use something like a stockbroker or somebody obsessed with money. The idea that we can get so latched into certain ideas that we forget about all else. This one thing becomes so important, and that's how our souls become lost. The idea of these tiny, pure souls covered by these sandy, monstrous, giant, hulking forms reminded me of a story that a friend once told me about their ayahuasca ceremony. So I may be misquoting some of this. It's been a while since I heard this story, but I think the main kind of idea comes through. In this ceremony, my friend asked essentially the machine elves, or the beings that come in an ayahuasca ceremony, why are people evil? And she was shown this form, and I believe if I'm remembering the story correctly, she was either shown Dick Cheney or asked the question of like, how is somebody like Dick Cheney so evil? And what she was shown was this like perfect little baby, crying and sad, but surrounding it were all these like forms and boxes, these hidden, like hiding away and protecting, armoring this thing, these false fronts, these facades, and essentially kind of, again, I may be misquoting, this is what I remember out of this story that I was told. The idea that, evil people, these horrible people, are just broken, sad, lost souls. A really humanizing kind of idea, especially with people that we struggle with so much. That's so important, I think, to keep that in mind. But it really kind of connected those dots to me, and I don't want to say anyone at Pixar is doing ayahuasca or whatever. It's just really cool spiritual ideas that seem to have cohesion across the board always really interest me. So the movie goes on to explore kind of our purpose for being here, which is a pretty heavy idea. For most people, I think purpose comes down to career, or at least that's how it's presented to us. Your reason for being here, you finding value, is having a respectable career and following through on that. They explore this a little bit in the movie. But what if we can make it more about our passions and our interests? Ideally, our career would harness our interests and our passions and our skills and utilize them in a nourishing way to ourselves and the world. But that's not always possible for everyone. And our purpose can't tie directly to capitalism, such a uniquely human idea in this present moment and expression of being a human being. The divine isn't creating souls and generating souls to power the machines of capitalism and democracy. It doesn't make any sense. There's a B-story conflict between the main character and his mother. Our main character has wanted to just play music his entire life, and he's sort of settled into the role of being a music teacher in a public school, but he wishes he could be in a band and travel and play music for people every night to show them the beauty of music, the way that he feels about music, and sharing that. And his mother has always been disapproving of this, and there is a Act 3 sort of conflict, a breakdown between the two of them, in which the main character stands up to his mom and sort of tells her how he feels about how she made him feel in his choices and wanting a career based around music. To her, playing music wasn't respectable, even though it's one of the only times he feels alive. So personal cosmology. Why are we here? There's no individual reason, and it's almost a cliche or a meme at this point, the idea of the existentialism of that question, why are we here? Even the contemplation of that can cause, breakdowns in the brain. But we can always find individual purpose and reason. And I don't want to say you need faith to live a fulfilling life. I have faith in many things. Some of them are religious based, but I don't think that that's necessarily super important for people to have a healthy expression of spirit or a true connection to their soul. I believe that things are devoid of meaning until we apply meaning to them. And I think we have a responsibility to try and do so very carefully. There's a kind of a responsibility that comes with magic. What if you could truly design and shape your universe? What if you already were? What if it was already happening to you, out of your control, influenced by external forces? You might feel a great loss of control and despair in that space. There are a lot of reasons to feel hopeless or to despair if you're living in the modern world. It can be overwhelming sometimes. And if we focus on that, it will only magnify. And eventually, it might even become the only thing that we're able to see. Hopelessness and despair in everything. Eventually, maybe beauty would even fade away. I've had this happen to me. I've fought my way out of it more than once. Sometimes have been worse than others. It takes effort to create, generate, and maintain a positive outlook in the modern world. But I find it to be absolutely worthwhile. But what if we were able to see beauty everywhere just by looking for it? or to turn our failures into lessons by applying gratitude and patience to ourselves, to find wonder in every connective moment, no matter the emotion brought up inside, or to live life by just appreciating the aliveness of the exact moment that we're in, and to just trust in the unfolding process of life. In the few weeks since I watched this movie, I started rereading Saga, one of the best stories ever written, a fantastic comic, and I recommend it to everyone. Full disclosure, if you get into it, it is currently on hiatus on one of the worst cliffhangers that I've ever experienced. So it's a great story, but I want you to know that I am putting that on you as well if you begin to enjoy this comic. I came across a line that really kind of resonated and sort of spoke to what I'm trying to get across with this video. Some art may have the power to change people, but stories can only change how we feel, and never for very long. Art and story can bring up strong emotions and generate epiphanies, but epiphanies are worthless unless they generate some sort of change in our experience. The emotion comes, and then it inspires, and the rest is up to you.